Okay, so how to make a heart or any piece of embroidery into a pendant. And I apologise, I am doing this on top of another piece of embroidery because my partner has a bit of a fetish for incredibly thick and heavy tabletops, which are very difficult to clip my camera arm to. So I'm doing this on top of another piece of embroidery. So I just cut round there, but this is actually 2 layers of fabric. I'm using the smaller scissors that I've got because with the big scissors you might have a lot more blade in play, and then if you slip you do a lot more damage. So it's just better to do it with the smaller scissors you can find, because with scissors this size you only ever really have a few millimeters of blade in play. So I've cut round it, and then I've cut the back layer away right down to the embroidery. And I'm going to take a piece of thread. Now I'm using a silk sewing thread because if you're ever doing this with a piece of silk embroidery, piercing silk with anything other than silk is quite difficult. So I'm just anchoring that thread, and then really I'm going to do exactly the same as you do with if you've ever used one of those self-covering buttons for dressmaking. I'm just gathering this together. Just a little gather stitch all around the outside. And then when I get round it, this fabric is quite fine, so it won't bulk up very much at the back. I'm just going all the way around there. And then I've cut a piece of cardboard. It's just thin white cardboard, or if you've got it, that thin plastic cardboard that modelers use is absolutely brilliant. But I haven't got any of that handy at the moment. So I'm just putting that inside my gather, pulling it to like a little purse string. And then I'm just going to put an anchoring stitch in the way of that to stop it. Oops. This is a relatively strong thread, but it's not overly thick. So that's pulled most of my white background canvas out of the way. The rest I can tuck round when I come to it. The next thing I'm going to do is, this is a piece of gold twist, and I'm just going to fix that on the back there, and I want it roughly lining up with the centre of the heart. Doesn't have to be millimetre perfect, but I'm just going to put that and just stitch it down roughly. I'm just holding it in place for now. So put that like that, and then the next thing I need is a backing fabric, and what I've got is, this is a piece of 13th century replica silk brocade, and I want a circle that's just a bit bigger than the circle of my pendant. Now I could do that by marking it with tailor's chalk, but silk really doesn't take to chalk very well at all. So I'm just going to roughly cut a circle and then adjust it. This bit was left over from a 13th century striped silk dress that I wore last week, and which I now have to fix because I split the sleeve in two. It was a little bit tight, mainly because when I made it, I had very little of the wool fabric that I use. I use this as decoration. So the next thing I'm going to do, it really doesn't matter about the pattern on this, is I'm just sort of levelling it up on there. And I'm just stitching it all the way around the outside. And tucking it as I go. If you wanted to, you could do the same thing and sort of do a little drawstring around it and put an extra piece of card in, but you don't really want it to be all that heavy. So I'm just doing it one little stitch at a time and tucking it as I go. So I'm just whip stitching it around the outside. So you don't have to use silk. You could use any fine fabric. You could use a printed cotton or whatever you've got lying around, but silk does have the virtue of being very, very lightweight and easy to handle if you've got it. And of course, because I'm using a silk to stitch with, it's going through the side of that brocade quite nicely. Yellow, of course, blends with the gold stitching a bit better too. This all feels a little bit Blue Peter, and I've just realised that the reference for Blue Peter will be completely lost on Americans. Blue Peter is one of the longest running children's TV series on BBC. It's had many, many presenters over the year. I'm just going to trim that down a bit more. It's had many, many presenters, and it's basically like a documentary magazine programme for children. So they do making things. They're very famous for making things out of toilet rolls. Well, not the actual toilet roll, but, you know, the cardboard bit in the middle. And washing up liquid bottles. And then they do adventures and celebrity interviews as well. So it's basically just a daytime TV programme for kids. But when I was a kid, you were like the ultimate celebrity in your primary school if you got a Blue Peter badge, which you got for appearing on the programme or having one of your letters read out. And I never knew anyone who had one. So I'm not going to go quite all the way around here because I want to leave myself with enough room to tuck this back down once I'm done. So I'm just going to leave about the width of my little finger there. I'm going to put an extra holding stitch through there. And then, oh, I've just realised I've got that completely off kilter. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to snip a couple of threads and redo a few stitches. Because I completely cocked that up. So I'm just, I've even, it's because I've anchored my gold thread in the wrong place. So I'll re-anchor it in the right place. I'm going to put a knot in the bottom actually so it holds the thread a bit better. So I'm re-anchoring it here. That's the right place. I'm just re-anchor that gold thread after I messed it up. And then I'm going to go through here and just re-secure that. And snip that little messy bit off there. And snip the little messy bit off there. So now that's basically central. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to make a loop there. And another loop. I'm going to try and get them roughly the same size. So. And just get that. Sew those together. So I've got double loop there for a little bit of extra strength. And then I'm just going to whip. This would actually be better off done with a slightly finer gold thread, but I'm going to use what I've got so that you can see it a little bit better. And I'm going at an angle through there so that the shortest part of the stitch goes over the gold, and I'm just going right the way around the outside. Beginning to realise I should have used a slightly heavier gold twist, but I'm just covering up that side, going all the way around. You can always go around a second time if your twist is too thin. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted. I'm sitting here stitching in the dining room because it's got good daylight. And there's a moth fluttering around and it's driving me mad. I want to go and murder it. So my stitches are showing a little bit more than they ought to because I'm just using this thicker thread so you can see it. If you match your colours a little bit better, you won't have that problem. Especially if you use like a finer filament silk for this second stage. You can of course untwist the twisted thread a little bit and go through it rather than around it, but to be honest, in a lot of the medieval stuff they just go around it. They're not as fussy about not having the thread show as we are today. So I think it just never occurs to them a lot of the time to cover some of this stuff up. So you just need to push that down a little bit under there. And before I go any further, I need to make a decision. Either to cut that off or go around another time. So I think I'm going to put an extra row of gold all around the outside, which means that I still need to leave this hole open at the back so I can push that down. And because I'm very clumsy, I want to leave a rather large hole because I'm not very good at shoving things down the back of pendants. So I'm just going through the linen now of my first pass. and I'm going to go round and just hold the second row over the first one. And honestly, I'm just hoping that I don't run out of thread at this point, because I've used the same thread all the way through. I probably should have changed it. So this would look much more elegant if I'd gone down to a thinner thread for this final stage. But at least you stand a chance of being able to see it if I'm using this thicker one. And I'm going over both of them just so that they sit together nicely. And once I've got two in place, it really covers that edge quite well. So the yellow thread that I'm using is not a fancy one, it's just a yellow silk sewing thread, to be honest. It's the stuff I use for German countered work and dressmaking. So it's very nice to hand sew with when you're making an outfit. I'm going all the way around. I'm going to go through that lumpy bit there. Hold it down a bit better. And then I'm coming to the point where this is going to have to cross over at the top. So just want to sew that bit underneath a bit better, so it's sticking out. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to wrap that around my suspension loop just to hold that in place. I mean, to be honest, what you could do if you wanted was you could reinforce that a little bit by going around it quite a few times. So I'm just going to go ahead and get another needle and I'll show you that bit. So I've gone around the base of my loop, and then I've got a nice big-eyed needle to put my gold thread through, which I've just come out of, obviously, because I'm being filmed. And I'm just pinching that together and wrapping the tail of my gold thread around my suspension loop. I didn't do this on the last one I did, but I think on the last one I did, I was using a vintage gold passing, which was, I've lost a thread there, was much, much thicker than the stuff I've got here. So it was stiffer and made a better hanging loop. Because this is a little soft, because this is a modern one, I'm just reinforcing my hanging loop by stitching around it. It's a bit tricky when you get to the top of the loop. I'm not doing a buttonhole stitch or anything, I'm just going round and round, because there isn't really enough. It would become very stiff if I did that. Just check that doesn't come out again. So I think I started out with about 9 inches of my gold thread. So I didn't have a very long bit to start with, but 9 inches to a foot is more than enough of what you need. There we go, nearly there. So I'm trying to keep those nice and close together so they look nice. I'm just starting to run out of gold thread now. I've got just enough left to go down through there, and I'm piercing through the back of the cardboard and just using this to tuck the gold down under, pull it through and then pull it off the end of the needle. And if you pull it nice and tight there, it will slip back underneath. And I've got a pesky bit that's come away. I'm just going to push back under because obviously I left my stiletto upstairs and I'm far too lazy to go and get it. So I'm just going to struggle with the scissors instead of making the job quicker. And then I just need to finish stitching the top. And I'm playing thread chicken. Maybe should have started with a longer bit of thread. Just need to tuck that down under, tuck that through. Oh, I've got a loop there. Just stitch that back under as well. I'm going to stitch that right through the back of the loop to make sure it holds firm. I'm just going to try and get 3 little stitches on there and then cut it off. And that one last stitch just needs pushing under a little bit where I haven't caught it. So there we have, and I'm still slightly wonky, but never mind. There we have one pendant made from underside couching with a slightly wonky loop on it. And I'm sure you'll do a much better job than me, because I'm about to rush off and do a summer school, and I've been putting off this job for weeks because I've been so busy. You know, when you know something's only going to take you 20 minutes, and then you just faff around and don't do it.